Welcome back to the Contrarians. Tonight we have a fantastic Patreon subscriber recommended thought exercise. We are making our panelists make Sophie's choice with their music. You only get to pick 1 year and 5 albums for the rest of your life. I expect some moans and some groans and some pain. Expect to see some usual suspects, but I'm hoping to find some unusual picks as well. And we're going to start with the man whose insane idea this was. Peter, tell us what your year is and your 5 albums.
All righty. Thank you. It's great to be here. Glad to have this great enthusiastic panel. This is definitely going to be fun and exciting, and hopefully a little bit, like you said, a little bit painful. Obviously, this exercise is like a Chinese drip torture. It's just 1 year after another. You go, oh my God, I can't leave that off. How can I leave this off? So I looked at this and I had to compromise like we all did. And I'm just going to jump right into it. And the key to me was to get as wide a range of my loves and tastes as I possibly could. So my year is 1966. Wow. And I am going to start with Buddy Rich and his big band. This is the swinging new big band. And as a drummer and a musician, I have to cover a wide range, not only as a listener, but as a player, and things that inspire me as a musician and a drummer. One of Buddy's most powerful live recordings. We won't go into details on these. It's just one of my favorite Buddy Rich albums, and I couldn't imagine not having something of this ilk to listen to for the rest of my life. So I have to include Buddy. Well, my second choice, I'm going to go even completely the other direction. I'm going with the debut from the Monkees. And so now I have some pop music, some great melodies, some great vocalization, something to make you happy, uplifting, and a complete contrary and a complete change of pace from where I was with the Buddy Rich band. So far I'm trying to cover, like I said, as many bases as I can. Thinking about this, there were a couple seminal artists that somehow I just could not leave off regardless. So I kind of had to work around them. One of them was Tom Jones. He's my favorite artist of all time. So I had to pick the album, and luckily he's got a ton of them that came out almost every year during this period. And this is Atomic. This in the US version has Thunderball, which is my favorite James Bond theme song. And there's just so much great stuff on here. Drummer Chris Slade, we know him from The Firm and AC/DC, playing drums through this stuff, just crushing it. Great arrangements, big, huge, powerful vocals. And it's also one of my favorite Tom Jones records, but I could not leave him off and look at myself in the mirror. That would just be awful. Now, the next one. Yeah, well, and the next one is kind of a dovetail off the Buddy. This is my favorite jazz record of all time. Mr. Frank, live at the Sands with Count Basie. I just think this is just a powerhouse, both obviously with Frank and Basie's orchestra and drummer Sonny Payne on there. Just love that guy, and they're just tearing it up. It's one of the great recordings of that era as well. So I've got to go with that. Now, the one album that really was kind of the whole deciding factor for this whole year, and I have to get my rock in, it's Fresh Cream. And Ginger Baker, one of my favorites, had to get me some Clapton in his prime era. Jack Bruce is unstoppable here. This is by far my favorite Cream record. And this gives me all my good jamming and hard rock and the blues. And hopefully with everything I've got there, I'll be somewhat content with those 5. But those are my 5 from 1966.
Sweet.
Nice. Fantastic,
Excellent.
Peter. Let's see if you are the earliest chronologically. I suspect that is going to be the earliest year we see tonight. Let's move on to Kevin. Kevin, what have you got for us? What's your year? What are your albums?
Well, I want to just reiterate what Peter was saying. I think the key was to try to pick something with a lot of variety. If this is going to be, your only choice of 5 albums for the rest of your life, you've got to have variety. I looked at a lot of different years, and ultimately a lot of them became kind of, too heavy on one genre of music or another. So I ended up on 1990. And when I was making all my lists, that just had the most variety for me. So I'll just start right off. Well, let me back up a little bit. So how I landed on this year was I started thinking about, well, what is music really? What does it do for me? And I think at a base level, it mirrors our emotions. And so I was looking for, sometimes when you're down, listening to down music cheers you up, or listening to something that makes you think and gives you more depth of thought, things like that. So that was kind of my thought process. So back to 1990, I thought first thing I want right out of the bat is something that's headbanging. And I went with Megadeth, Rust in Peace. This is by far my favorite thrash album. The production's perfect. There are no skips on this album. Just fantastic playing. And when you consider that they brought in 2 brand new band members at the time, just a real feat, a real accomplishment. Next, I wanted something that was kind of dark and moody, and again, had that range of emotions. And I went with Danzig 2, Lucifuge. I listened to this again today, and I'm just amazed at the variety on this album. It's got Sabbath type songs. It's got some R&B on what's the song? Is that Blood and Tears? We're Tired of Being Alive. I get the first 3 of these kind of confused, but once I start listening to it again, I'm like, oh yeah, this is a great album. It's got like some Southern rock kind of vibes to it. It's kind of gothic in parts. It's one that I can listen to over and over and just not get tired of. Then I wanted to pick something that I was a little unfamiliar with, but still liked, and thought something I could grow into, and a band that I really wanted to explore more. And so I went with Jane's Addiction, Ritual the Habitual. I love the quirkiness of this album. The first half is, that classic Jane's Addiction kind of funk rock alternative sound, and then the back half is that real moody part where Perry Farrell is writing about his old girlfriend, the one that died. And it's almost proggy, it really takes you on a journey, that whole album. And so I really enjoy that. I think that's something I can listen to again, over and over and over again. Then I wanted to pick something that made me want to dance and move. And I could only think of one person for that, and that's Madonna with, and this is her greatest hits collection. And I normally don't pick greatest hits, but this thing has sold millions and millions. I think it's well beyond diamond, maybe double diamond at this point. And if you push me in a corner, I could even say it's for one song, and that's Vogue. I think that's the greatest pop song I've ever heard. I think the video is the best thing I've ever seen too. And I remember that when I was 11, 12 years old when this came out. And I to this day, when it comes on, I automatically hit repeat. I just love it. And then, you get all the hits from the 80s on there, plus 3 new songs that came on this album. And then last, I figured I needed something that would make me laugh. And so I went with a comedy album, Andrew Dice Clay, Day the Laughter Died.
Oh.
This is actually a headphones album. You want to listen to this on headphones. You hear the clinking of the glasses. You hear people moaning and groaning. You hear the interaction with the crowd, because the whole album is 90 minutes of crowd work. He prepared nothing. He was at the height of his powers and decided, I just want to make a double album where I just go into a club. And I think it's around the holidays. It's a really weird crowd and it gets combative at times, but it's one of the greatest performances, music, comedy, dance, whatever, that I've ever heard. And so, yeah, those are my 5.
Excellent.
Wow.
Very cool.
Hickory duck.
Yeah, that last one is going to stand out as a contrarian pick, but hey, that's why I love this group, right?
Yeah.
2
why we're here.
panelists, 2 vastly different years and vastly different perspectives. Rand, let's see what you bring to the table. 1 year, sir. 5 albums. What do you got?
Okay, 1 year, 5 albums. Well, I was 19 and 20 during 1972, so that's my year. And I'm going to go in order because that's the way I roll. First one is that I got to see these guys live perform this in Las Vegas, Nevada, when I was in the Air Force. Mind blowing, just mind blowing. But we all either love Jethro Tull thick as a brick, or we don't know about it, or we hate it. It's got to be one of those three. My fourth one is my most listened to Pink Floyd album ever, and that's this.
Say the title, Rand. A lot of people aren't going to be able to see that CD, Jeff. Okay.
You're right. It's Obscured by Clouds.
Okay.
It's a movie soundtrack from a French film called Lebel. I've seen the movie, and I kept thinking to myself, "Where's the Pink Floyd?" It's like very little of it in the movie, and it's in French. And you have to read a lot of subtitles. But anyway, the album, I love the album. I think the usage of the Minimo synthesizer by Rich Wright and probably Roger Waters is pretty breathtaking. And I just love this album. I've listened to this more than Dark Side of the Moon when I was in the Air Force in Puerto Rico. I mean, this was there were 3 albums that I listened to mostly in 1972, and that was Obscured by Clouds, Deep Purple, Machine Head, and you're right, Demons and Wizards. But I wasn't really trying to do honorable mentions there. Okay, so number 3, I bought this and my number 1 the same night on 8-track. Emerson, Lake and Palmer Trilogy. Fantastic record. I could listen to this over and over and over and over, and I never get bored with it. It's just complete masterpiece. And my number 2, same thing I just said, Genesis Foxtrot. Watch of the Skies just tore my head off. I fell in love with the Mellotron and ended up buying myself one. And Supper's Ready has got to be the most amazing song that anybody ever did up to that point. I mean, God, there's only one album that actually trounces this for me. Grant knows what it is. I don't even have to say it. But
no, really?
This is my number one. This is my number 1 album of all time, and my favorite thing. I don't think anybody has put together a song like Close to the Edge. This all 3 songs I love, but that title cut, Close to the Edge, it just means so much to me. It has I don't want to be egotistical or anything like that, but the German word for edge is Rand. And I found that out. I found that out on the back of a Kraftwerk album called Autobahn. I remember I was in Sacramento looking at the lyrics and going, "Holy crap, that's my name!"
Rand, are you sure you didn't get that off of the back of Mad Magazine or something? Are you sure?
I thought he was going to say, I found that out on the back of a Kraft dinner box.
There, that would have been better.
No, it was a Kraftwerk album. And anyway, that's I just think if I had only one disc to listen to for the rest of my life, it would be this. In fact, I'm going to ask my wife when I die, if I go before her, and hopefully I do, that she plays Close to the Edge at my funeral, because it is my song. I mean, everything about it, it's my soul. It's encompassed in that tune.
You're going to risk people looking at their watch. It's like, what's going on here?
Yeah.
What is happening?
Way to bring down the mood, Rand.
Yeah, talking about death. Thanks, Rand.
No, well, that's what this is all about. This is 5 albums we have to listen to until we die.
It is what it is. Those are great picks. 1972, 3 very different perspectives. I bet Martin's going to go a different place, though. Martin, you're up next.
Definitely. I just want to remark, I love the comedy pick, the Dice Man. That's really cool. And I love Peter's pick of Buddy Rich, because you don't have a lot of albums to listen to, so you're going to have to make your own music. So it's great to have a manual there, right?
Right.
And so very cool. And love Rand's picks too. So I went with 1979. Starting with The Damned, Machine Gun Etiquette. My favorite Damned album. This is a good raucous album, keeps you young, a lot of variety on it. Challenging, very brutal sort of production, but really cool. You got Algie Ward on it as well, nice and heavy. And hopefully, I'll be able to bring my Damned drink coaster along with it. So that would be kind of cool. So yeah, my favorite Damned album, like I say, heavy, but it's got some cool keyboards and poppy things, but always very crushing and brutal. Next, I'm going to go with Gang of Four Entertainment, the debut Gang of Four album, which, I've been really in a post-punk mood for the last little while. Hopefully it lasts through this 5-album eternity thing. But yeah, I've always loved this album. I bought it as a new release. It was one of the first non-heavy things I really got into, but it's really challenging and good lyrics and very astringent and rhythmic and kind of brutal, but it's not like the Damned, even though the Damned is almost moving into post-punk with that one. Next, I went with, something you got to do with these things is you got to go with double albums, right? To cheat, right? So,
Right.
So I went with Chic Your Booty, Frank Zappa. I looked at other years and I literally started with thinking about Frank Zappa double albums to pick out my year, actually. But I settled on this year, and I just think, there's a bunch of stuff on here I'm not crazy about, but that means I've just got to kind of learn them more. But yeah, I really like the likes of Dancing Fool, Jewish Princess is really good. Baby Snakes is really good. Jones Crusher. So there's a lot of good stuff on here. Bobby Brown. So yeah, double album. And this is kind of cool. I pulled this. This is a long story. When I bought it, I traded a bunch of memorabilia with a writer from California in the 70s, famous writer, actually, Stephen Rosen, right? But I got a bunch of paper goods, and this is really cool. Look at this coffee stained letter. And
cool.
it's Dear Radio or Press Person, Phonogram Mercury and Zappa Records would frankly love to have you come and meet Chic Your Booty. Would you walk a mile for a camel? You won't have to if you camel along to El Provido on February 13th at 6 p.m. We guarantee you thrills, excitement, fun, drama, surprise, food and drinks, blah, blah, blah. So it's kind of cool. An invite to a Chic Your Booty listening party, right? And along the post-punk end of things, magazine, Secondhand Daylight,
There you go.
an absolute masterpiece. These guys are like the Roger Waters of post-punk. It's a gatefold, so you get more to look at with your 5 albums, right? And it's although I've kind of got a post-punk theme, it's very different from all these other things. This is just beautifully recorded. There's some eerie sax. It's a little bit like Bowie's Berlin years. Really cutting, sinister lyrics. Yeah, pretty depressing to accompany my mood as I'm going to be depressed because I only have 5 albums. And this was stuck in with it. This is a nice magazine original ad for it. They had really weird ads in the old papers. And then my last one is another cheat, Clash, London Calling. Greatest album of all time, apparently, by many sources. And I would tend to agree. This is an incredible album. It is a double album. It's beautifully, beautifully recorded by Guy Stevens. Love the drum sound on it, but it's just guitar, bass, and drums. Not a lot of fuzz on the electric guitars, even when they are electric, but there's a lot of acoustic stuff here as well, but just absolutely stacked with great songs. There's really no filler on it. And again, yeah, I thought this double album theme would do me well. So there you go. That's my 5.
Excellent.
Wow.
Great.
Fantastic. And so far, 4 down, 4 vastly different lists. That's what you love about the Contrarians, right? Grant, don't break the
Yes,
streak.
sir.
Give us a year and 5
Well,
albums.
Peter Jones. I should have went right after Peter Jones, because I'm going to go back to the greatest year. And it's not 1966, Peter Jones, but I could have picked that.
I know.
I'm going to go with 1967, because think about that whole era. There was nothing, so much creativity. The Beatles were leading the charge. Beach Boys were in the studio doing Smile. You've got Beatles, Sgt. Pepper. You've got Birds, Younger Than Yesterday. You've got The Who, Sellout. Probably one of the first concept albums of all time. So I'm naming all mine pretty much, but I could have just picked all Beatles stuff, and that's all I would ever need. So I'm picking the Beatles, Sgt. Pepper. I'm going to go with Magical Mystery Tour. So we've got 2 Beatle records, because I'm trying to get all the Beatles I can. And then I'm going to pick the Monkeys, Pisces, Aquarius, Capricorn, and Jones. Now you might say, Grant, for God's sakes, the Monkeys aren't even a real band. But if you listen to that record, the songwriting, the production, the Chip Douglas production, the vocals of the Monkey, it's a classic record. It's easily a 5-star record. Nothing weak on it. It still stands up. Peter Jones will probably back me up on that. My other one, the other one I'm going to say I think is the greatest Byrds album of all time, which is Younger Than Yesterday. So you've got You Want to Be a Rock and Roll Star on it. My Back Pages. Roger McGuinn's Rickenbacker 12-string sound is incredible. Another song which is incredible is Dave Crosby's Renaissance Fair. It's a perfect Byrds album. Well, no, there's no Gene Clark, but holy crap, they still were able to rise up to the top even after Gene Clark left in 1965. And then the other one, like I mentioned, one of the greatest, well, actually it's a failed concept album, but the Who's Sellout. Side 1 is absolutely brilliant. Side 2 kind of falls apart, but the concept where they have advertisements in between songs. I mean, Pete Townshend's whole concept was to sell ads that they could place on the album. And if you ever listen to the box set, they have a whole bunch of ads that never made it to the original album, like Jaguar and Coca-Cola. And it's just the creativity we're talking about in 1967's never been ever matched. Everything now is just a rehash. It's already been, you know? So if I'm going to bring anything with me, I want to go back to the original stuff. I don't want something that's been a rehash. And I think 1967 was the peak of pop music at that point. There's just been variations of that original theme. And to go along with what Peter Jones says, you could loop 1966 and 67 together because both of those years were just absolutely phenomenal. So there you go, kids. That's my pick in a nutshell.
Very nice.
Psychedelic, Grant.
Stuff.
I knew there was some risk of us overlapping.
I know. I knew. I just had a feeling.
And it got John Entwistle free roto sound strings for the rest of his
It's
life.
such a great record. Just think about the fact that they came up with that then. I know it might have been a lot of pot, but what I'm saying, unbelievable. Everything else has just been a rehash.
God, that's my favorite song.
Ugh.
Right.
It's a great record.
Great
I Can
stuff.
See for Miles. Holy mackerel.
No one's disputing the awesomeness of some of those songs, at least not
Great.
here. All right,
Great.
so that was dangerously close to having 2 of the same year, but I'm sure Matt's not going to make that same mistake for us. Matt, give us a year and 5 albums.
I hate to disappoint the panel, but we have a duplicate. So
Oh, okay.
Holy crap, a duplicate.
I'm surprised, but maybe I shouldn't have been. If I studied who was going to be on the panel, I wouldn't have been surprised. I am picking 1972 as well. So tip of the hat, Rand.
Yeah, go.
We overlapped on only one record though, so I'm going to switch my order to cover that one first, so we at least have a little bit of suspense to this. So Thick as a Brick for sure is on there. I love that it is both like a progressive rock concept album masterpiece and a satire of a progressive rock concept album. So I find it infinitely amusing. It's funny, it's whimsical at times, but it's deep at times as well. And if I'm only going to have 5 records to listen to for the rest of my life, I'm going to be a little bored. So it's nice to have, you can fold out and read the paper and get entertained that way. So that's my first choice. So the other ones will be different than what Rand picked. And my next one is Nick Drake, Pink Moon. So
Pretty short, Matt, though. Pretty short album.
Well, I was thinking about that, right? So it is definitely in the pantheon of great, really short albums. So it's like a Rain and Blood or Ramones' debut album. So it's under 30 minutes. So I'm not really playing very smart with my choices here from that standpoint. But, just love Nick Drake, love this album. It's his 3rd and last album. It's so sparse. It's other than a little piano that he overdubs, it's just him and an acoustic guitar. He's such a unique guitar player. He's such a unique singer. His lyrics are both sort of abstract and personal at the same time, that to me, it makes it just such an intimate record, right? You feel like you're really in his mind, which is, you know, an interesting and ultimately sad place to be. But just love the record. So that was my second choice. Next one. So unlike Martin, I am not contrarian when it comes to David Bowie. I really, my favorite album is Rise and Fall of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars. I love the sound of the record right from the beginning. So the way the drums fade in on 5 years all the way to the end, where you get that sort of pause during Rock and Roll Suicide, and then the instruments all come back in for one last note. And just the way it builds up to Rock and Roll Suicide, and just the You're Not Alone and Give Me Your Hands and all that. I love the journey that it takes you on, and like the instructions say on the back, I enjoy to play it loud. So that one had to be on there. And then my fourth choice is Captain Beyond.
Oh, yeah, excellent.
So their first
Nice.
First record, you know, they're a sort of super group, right? Like, so it's not they're not all individually superly famous, but they come from other bands. So you've got you know, from Deep Purple, from Iron Butterfly, and then from Johnny Winter, the band members. And it's progressive in that, you know, you've got kind of the time signature stuff. The songs all flow together, but rock's quite a bit harder than other prog rock albums that go at that around at that time. And so it sort of hits me both in the prog and sort of the hard rock sweet spot. So long favorite of mine. And then my last one, I have to go with Blue Oyster Cult's
There you go.
debut album.
No.
It does, yes, shockingly. So it does not sound like the rest of their records, but it has the elements. Or it's a very dated kind of production style to it, but it has the occult imaginos type lyrics. It's got Buck Dharma's very unique guitar phrasing. It has a Buck Dharma melodic song with Last Days of May. They're trying to be heavy metal on this. They're not really, but it makes the song, so, you know, there's aspects that are heavier for them, and having that kind of raw guitar sound. And so going through this exercise, I realized that, like, my last two songs, right, this is the early 70s, but I would argue that both of these are like 60s songs, right? So they're really, you know, Blue Oyster Cult, they're coming out of the 60s as Soft White Underbelly and Stock Forest Group. Captain Beyond, the players are in bands in the 60s. They have really still a 60s sensibility to them, but it's almost like they perfect the 60s sort of sound. And so to me, like, this is a better Doors record than any Doors record. When I was thinking about other places to go, I think that's actually what I really like. I almost went with the early 80s because it's like perfecting 70s records. I think maybe there's sort of a turn of the decade thing going on. In the beginning of a decade, things change, and but you also get old bands doing new stuff. So those are my choices.
Excellent.
Excellent.
Very good.
Very cool.
All right. So let's see here. We have two who have gone with the 60s, one 1990. I'm going to join the voices for the 1970s. So my reasoning started off being similar to Kevin's in a different direction, but I thought, if I'm going to only have 5 albums, what do you want? Well, you want something that's comfort food, right? You want your favorites. You want something that's new to you so that you can grow into it with time.
Mhm.
And I had 2 very specific criteria that I was going to fight or die for. And that was, I need an album with Dio on vocals, and I need a Bowie album. And actually, there were 2 years that met that particular criteria. See if you can figure out what those are. But my particular year is going to be 1976. So looking at the list of albums that came out in 1976, it is quite possibly one of the greatest years in hard rock. It is absolutely loaded, but I did get it down to 5. So I'm going to start off with Comfort Food, and that is Boston's first album. Quite possibly the perfect American hard rock album. It is one of those very few 10 out of 10 albums. I've been listening to it since 1976. I can, it's probably a false memory, but I seem to remember being in the car with my parents coming home from church on a Sunday afternoon and then playing More Than a Feeling on the radio in 1976. And I have never tired of that album. And I think it is one that I could take with me as one of my 5 albums. Also, in the line of comfort food, fitting my Dio criteria, we've got Rainbow Rising. I don't know how much I need to say about Rainbow Rising. It's one of the greatest heavy metal albums of all time. It's got Ritchie Blackmore at the height of his powers. It's got Ronnie sounding amazing. It's got long epics. It's got short, hard-hitting songs. It's just a perfect album. And if I can only have one Dio album, I'm willing to settle for that one. Now, for my Bowie pick, I went with Station to Station. Now, Station to Station isn't my favorite Bowie album, but it's a great album, and it's got sonic diversity. So here you are, 5 albums to listen to. You want as much sonic diversity as you can get. And this album is all over the map. It has different moods. As Kevin was saying, music speaks to your emotions, right? So Station to Station, it's up, it's down. Bowie was at a very complicated place in his life, strung out on cocaine. And frankly, if you see pictures from him from 1976, that man could have died at any time. And it's really reflected in his art. And he produced this beautiful album. Again, not my favorite, but I'm willing to take it with me as the one Bowie album I get. And then I threw in 2 ringers. So these are albums that I'm not super familiar with, but I think that I can grow into them, and they provide a lot of sonic interest. The first one is going to be Kansas Left Overture.
Great record.
Can't go wrong there.
I had the right Kansas one there. So I like Kansas. Now, I don't love Kansas, but I like them. I love the singing. It's got a lot of interest in the music. And I think that it is an album that I could grow with over the years. And there's nothing on it that turns me off. So I think that it was just one that would increase and increase and increase as I listened to it. And my other one, even a little bit more left of field, but generally acknowledged as one of the perfect jazz fusion albums, and that is the Mahavishnu Orchestra, The Intermounting Flame. Yeah. Had to make sure I got the title of that one right. John McLaughlin is a strange bird. Sometimes I like his playing, sometimes it's too outside. But again, that's what provides the interest, right? You only get 5 albums. So some days I'm going to be into it and some days I'm not going to be into it, but there's always going to be something to discover there. And I think that that's actually going to keep it more interesting in the long run. So 1976 is my year.
Excellent.
Great picks.
Very good.
All right, everybody, we powered right through that. So for those of you who are dying to throw out some honorable mentions, if you've got a backup year or if you've got some honorable mentions from your own year, feel free to throw them out. Let's try and keep it, 5 minutes or less per person. Peter?
Yeah. Alternate years. I have like 12 of them. And the whole interesting thing is that first of all of these picks from everybody are just exceptional. And I think the most enjoyable part is the rationale and the reasoning behind it, what motivates you and what causes you to pick the things that you do, because art does speak to all of us differently. And therefore we all appreciate and enjoy different art for different reasons. And I think that's what's awesome. There were a couple years that I really had trouble with. If I was looking at a couple records, if I was staying more in the rock and hard rock world, it would have been a little easier for me. 72 or 75 probably would have been places I would have stayed. But I would have missed the variety. Now I don't have any Deep Purple. I don't have any Rush here. I don't have a lot of things that are kind of home to me. But I thought the variety. So I'm just going to stick with some honorables from the same year. So I'm just going to things that I was mulling over as to include in 1966. And there's 3 real standouts for me. The first one's Revolver. And the thing with me is, and I've talked to Grant, I've talked to other people, I'm one of these odd birds with the Beatles. My love for them pretty much stops at 66. I don't dislike anything post that, but 66 and earlier is my era that I really, really enjoy. And this was kind of that wrapping up point where they were this kind of band before the record, and they were this kind of band after, and they kind of fall in the middle of there. So Revolver could have easily kind of worked its way in there somewhere. Obviously Pet Sounds is in there that, it speaks for itself. The one that was really tugging at me, but I did have a good rationale, was John Mayall and the Blues Breakers with Eric Clapton, the Beano album. Absolutely love it. But I was bailed out because I already had Fresh Cream and I didn't lose Eric. I just took him over to the band I preferred more. So I was able to keep that one in there. So yeah, there were other years. It's hard to miss My Made in Japan, Kiss Alive, On Your Feet or On Your Knees, albums like that, and Rainbow and stuff like that. But I'm okay with Tom, Frank, and the Monkees and Cream and Buddy. So that would be my honorables from those years if I could find a way to sneak 6 into the experiment. So
there you go. Someday we'll debate Beano versus Fresh Cream, but that'll be a different.
Oh, that'd be awesome.
All right, Kevin, do you have any honorable mentions you want to bring up?
Yeah, I'll go through them quickly. First of all, 1990, I left off Black Crowes, Shake Your Moneymaker. I love that album.
Okay.
Slayer, Season in the Abyss. An album I thought I could grow into, Public Enemy, Fear of a Black Planet. I love that album. But it's still one that I discover more and more each time I listen to it. The first, Trouble, the self-titled album. Oddly enough, I would have had 3 Rick Rubin produced albums on in my list. He produced the Andrew Dice Clay album and the Danzig album. Queensryche Empire. Yeah, that's kind of it. Ragged Glory, Neil Young. I love that album too. As far as other years, I almost went with 1967 because that is well before my time, but I do recognize it as, you have Jimi Hendrix, RE Experience, The Doors, self-titled album, Sgt. Pepper's, Albert King, Born Under a Bad Sign. I love that album.
Israeli Gears.
Yeah.
Saucer Full of Secrets.
Yeah, it keeps going.
That's 68. You mean Piper.
Oh, then I'm incorrect. Thank you.
Aretha Franklin, I Never Loved a Man the Way I Love You, is a great album. When I first thought of this exercise, I thought 75 was a shoe-in because it's Physical Graffiti, Sabotage, A Night at the Opera, Wish You Were Here, Dreamboat Annie. That would have been just too easy, so I discarded that one right away. Let's see what else. I almost went with 2019 because that checked a lot of the boxes for me. I had Angel Witch, Angel Blight for a heavy album. I had Rival Sons, Feral Roots, which is almost classic rock album. Lana Del Rey, Norman effing Rockwell. That's a great pop album. Tool, Fear Inoculum. That's probably my favorite Tool album. And then Yola, Walk Through Fire, which is a great soul and country roots album. So,
all right, lots of diversity there. Rand, you got a relatively short list of alternate mentions for us.
I've got 3, and I've got a tiny little story about meeting Lee Dorman, if Matt's interested.
He's nodding.
Okay, good. Okay, Jeff Beck Group, Cozy Powell on drums. It's a great album. It's nothing like Truth. It's nothing like Beckola, but it's really good. Good rockin' album. And you get Going Down on here, which is his big song. He does that. And he used to do it in every concert we ever saw. And then I've got Nectar, A Tab in the Ocean. Yeah, I forgot to say I'm sticking with 1972.
There you go.
This is a great album. Headphones, any kind of incentive that you might want to add to it, but I just think the music is just gorgeous and really, really, really heavy. And then I think the king of them all for me would be Gentle Giant Octopus. Now this is the British cover that Roger Dean did, but for the Americans like me who had the original on 8-track, we had this cover. So it's nice that they put it there, so they give it to you, you know. And we just lost Ray Shulman, the bass player and violinist and trumpet player recently, but I just love Gentle Giant. For 10 years, they just absolutely stunned me, except for maybe, you know, 1 or 2 albums that weren't quite as popular. And my story, Matt, is in 1994, me and my ex, we went down to San Ramon in the Bay Area to see Iron Butterfly. And it was pretty much the original band, except they had a couple of extra members, but Doug Engel was there, Ron Bushy was there, Lee Dorman was there. And I came down with my Captain Beyond CD that I bought in 1990, 4 years prior, from Japan. And I had the booklet. I didn't really bring the actual CD. I just brought the little booklet, you know, like this. And so there's a meet and greet after the show, and I'm sitting there with Lee and I'm talking to him and stuff. And I said, "Hey, Lee, would you sign this, please?" And I gave him the Captain Beyond book, and he goes, "What the hell is this?" I go, "It's your CD from Captain Beyond." He goes, "Well, I didn't know anything about it. Nobody told me." I felt like, holy crap. "Well, would you sign it right here?" And on the back, there's that picture on the back of the album where they're all standing by the rocks of the ocean or whatever. And he writes right above it, Lee Dorman, and a little arrow pointing at him.
Cool.
And that's
Well, the
Captain
music
Beyond
business.
story.
Yeah, who can figure it out?
Nice guy. Nice guy.
Okay, Martin, you have some honorable mentions?
Yeah, sticking with 1979. So for one to grow into, Susie and the Banshees join hands. I've been playing a lot of Susie and the Banshees lately. This pretty noisy sounding one, but it's not one I've been playing a lot. Boomtown Rats, The Fine Art of Surfacing, my favorite Boomtown Rats album, just a pop masterpiece, as is Tonic for the Troops, I suppose. Thin Lizzy, Black Rose, possibly my second favorite Thin Lizzy album. XTC, Drums and Wires, for a little more challenging post-punk. The Adverts, Cast of Thousands, when they changed from being a punk band to being a really interesting post-punk band, a lot of sort of acoustic antheming going on there, a little bit of a Van Morrison vibe, Dexy's Midnight Runners vibe, possibly Bruce Springsteen. Ted Nugent, State of Shock. We did a Contrarian show, and I actually called that my favorite Ted Nugent album. Bluish Cult Mirrors. There you go, Matt. So the best sounding album Bluish Cult ever did. We can argue about the songs. And then the only other one I had out was this one, because I did a switch. So this is both a double album, Fleetwood Mac Tusk. It's both a double album and an album that I could spend time growing into, because I never feel like I master it well. And when I started this entire exercise, I started with 1974 and Lamb Lies Down to Broadway for exactly that same reason. It's like, here's a double. I never feel like I know this thing perfectly. It'd be a great one to have if it was one of your 5. So that's all my 1979s.
That's my
Fantastic.
second favorite concept album.
Yeah, it's very cool. Yeah.
All right, Grant, you have any
Well,
honorables?
Well, I can lift some things. All I can say, we're talking 1967. You've got Beach Boys' Wild Honey, which is okay. A great record, but not quite what Smile would have been if Smile came out. And of course, in 2011, Capitol reissued all those Smile sessions, which were recorded in 67. So I'm always fascinated with 1967, because had the Beach Boys produced Smile before Pepper, how would that have affected things? Because if you've listened to any of the Smile tracks, they're beyond the beyond. I mean, absolutely brilliant. Brian Wilson was just absolutely the master of the studio. Exactly. Songwriting, you got Van Dyke Park's lyrics. I mean, the vocals, Smile is incredible. I know it didn't come out in 67, but my God, it was recorded then. So I'm going to stick it in there. I mean, it's just
Surf's Up's a masterpiece.
Surf's Up's a masterpiece. But you also had Love Forever Changes. Holy crap. Arthur Lee, give me a break. You've got the Moody Blues, Days of Future Past. What a phenomenal record. I mean, there's just so much great stuff. Jefferson Airplane, After Bathing at Bacter's, psychedelic, experimental. I mean, everything was still fresh in 67 and in 66, Peter Jones. So things, a lot of experimentation, you know, nothing had already been done. This is all brand new. Buffalo Springfield again, which is great. And then Kevin mentioned Disraeli Gears. What else real quick? Doors Strange Days, the first Doors album. It's amazing that both of those records both came out in 67, you know, but that's what they did then. These bands cranked records out then, you know. Hell, I'm surprised the Doors didn't have 3 albums in 67. Tim Buckley, Hello Goodbye is another great one. First Procol Harum album. Rand probably is getting all giddy about that one. Jimi Hendrix, Are You Experienced? I could keep going, kids. 1967 was an incredible year for creativity. Everything was fresh, and there was a lot of LSD and a lot of pot. So I'm sure that probably. But
everything was fresh, but the musicians who didn't bathe and were totally stoned the entire year.
Exactly. But creativity-wise, top-notch stuff.
Super creative. All right, Matt, you're on the hot seat. You got some honorable mentions for us?
Yeah, and I'll just start with Grant. My all-time favorite album came in 1967, which is Leonard Cohen, Songs of Leonard Cohen.
I could have mentioned that too. What a great record.
Best lyrics ever.
Yeah.
So I think Rand covered 72 better than I ever could, so I won't add on there. The other 2 years that I was really struggling to leave off would be 1980. So Jim Carroll Band, Catholic Boy, Cultosaurus Erectus for Blue Oyster Cult, The Cars, Panorama, the first Maiden album, so Sabbath, right? So tough choices to lead off there. And then 1984 was a tough one to leave off. So for me, Hoodoo Gurus, Stone Age Romeos, my all-time favorite records.
Hoodoo Gurus, yeah.
Husker Du, Zen Arcade, Minutemen, Double Nickels, and that would have been better. I should have been doing the double album, so I could have picked up 2 double albums if I went with 84. But I'll leave it at that.
All right, very good.
It's good.
So the other year that I really looked at was 1983. So again, I got to have a Dio album and I got to have a Bowie album. So of course, 83 gave us Holy Diver. Again, shouldn't have to defend that pick to anybody who's a Ronnie James Dio fan. And it gave us Let's Dance. Now, Let's Dance, for whatever reason, is now a bit of a contentious album by the more artiste Bowie fans, but doggone it, the first 3 tracks of that album, in fact, the entire first side, are for my money, the tightest pop record that has ever been issued. And it's so easy to forget because it was so massively successful that nothing like that had ever been done. You know, you say, oh, well, Bowie just brought in the blues. The blues was dead. People, the blues was not making money in 1983. That had all gone the way of the dodo in the 70s. So Bowie bringing in an unknown guitar player, Stevie Ray Vaughan was nobody in 1983, to play on his album and have it produced by a guy. Chic couldn't even make the top 100 in 1981. All right, Chic was no longer a commercial force. Bowie brought in these guys and produced a fantastic album. Sorry, I didn't mean this to be quite so Bowie-centric. But Let's Dance, it's awesome. Give it more of a chance. So we have Holy Diver and Let's Dance. And then, so I'm throwing in some Black Sabbath as well, because in 1983, we got Born Again, an album that I just absolutely adore. Even though it's Ian Gillan's only vodka-fueled outing, excuse me, is tequila-fueled?
Vodka-fueled outing, yeah.
Tequila, most likely.
With Black Sabbath. And then a couple of wild cards. I'm throwing in my favorite Yes album, probably heresy to the Yes aficionados, but it's 90125. I can't help it. I like Trevor Rabin's songwriting. I like him better than Steve Howe. Steve may be the more accomplished guitarist, but I think Trevor has those pop hooks and just a little bit more of a metal edge. And as a hard rock guy, I appreciate that. And then the Police, Synchronicity,
right?
Oh, yeah.
That album absolutely dominated MTV in 1983. And as an MTV addict at that time, I was just glued to, Sting singing. I'm not going to burst into song here, but singing at the top of his lungs. Every song on that is just brilliant. And again, there's my Grower album, because it's the one I'm least familiar with, but I think I can find a lot to love in it as time goes on. But 1976 just edged it out. Okay, people, Peter Jones, thank you very much for suggesting this topic. I want to thank all of our panelists for joining us tonight. This has been a fantastic discussion. As always, my hope doing these shows is that you leave thinking, I've got to find that album and listen to it. We've heard a lot of fantastic music thrown out. Check out the Patreon for the Contrarians. It's a great community. Buy t-shirts, like, subscribe, all those channel supporting things. And we will see you in the next video. Everybody, thank you for being here.
Thanks, guys. See you
Bye.
later.
Yeah, thanks.
Very cool.
Yep.
There you go. That was